The ghost in room 13. I've never believed in ghosts. Always thought they were the stuff of old tales, made to frighten children or keep people in line. But there's something that happened to me not too long ago, something I've never been able to explain, no matter how hard I try. It was a stormy night, the kind where the rain hammers against your windows and the wind howls like a wounded animal. I was traveling for work, and after a long day on the road, I needed a place to stay. There wasn't much to choose from in the middle of nowhere, but I eventually found a small, rundown motel, the kind that looked like it hadn't seen a coat of fresh paint in decades. The neon sign flickered weakly as I pulled into the parking lot, and the place gave off a vibe that was more Bates Motel than Holiday Inn, but I was too tired to care. I just wanted a bed and some sleep. I stepped into the lobby, and the old man behind the counter gave me a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Looking for a room?" he asked, his voice gravelly. "Yeah, just for the night," I replied, handing over my credit card. He glanced at it, then slid a key across the counter, his hand lingering over it for just a moment too long. "Room 13, he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Last room on the right." I nodded, taking the key, but as I turned to leave, I caught something in his eyes, something like pity, or maybe fear. But before I could ask, he looked away, and I shrugged it off as just another quirk of small-town folks. Room 13 was at the end of a dimly lit hallway, the air thick with the smell of mildew. The key rattled in the lock, and when I pushed the door open, I was greeted by a room that felt more like a time capsule than a place to stay. The wallpaper was peeling, the bedspread faded and threadbare, and the old tube TV in the corner looked like it hadn't worked in years. But it was a bed, and that's all I cared about. I dropped my bag, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed onto the mattress. It wasn't long before the exhaustion caught up with me, and I drifted off to sleep. I don't know how much time had passed when I woke up, but something had disturbed me. A noise, a presence. My heart was pounding, and the room felt colder than it had been before, like the temperature had dropped by several degrees. I sat up, my breath visible in the air, and that's when I heard it. A faint sound, almost like a whisper, coming from the corner of the room. I turned my head slowly, my eyes scanning the darkness, and that's when I saw it, a figure standing in the shadows, just barely visible in the weak light from the window. It was a woman, or at least the shape of one, dressed in a long, flowing gown that looked like it belonged in another century. Her hair hung around her face, hiding her features, but I could feel her eyes on me, cold, piercing, and filled with an overwhelming sense of sorrow. I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat, and she began to move, gliding toward me with an unnatural grace, her feet not even touching the ground. The closer she came, the stronger the sense of dread became, like the air itself was pressing down on me, suffocating me. She stopped at the foot of the bed, her head tilting slightly as if studying me, and then she spoke, her voice a low, mournful whisper that seemed to echo in the stillness of the room. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice carrying an ancient sadness, like she'd been asking the same question for centuries. I couldn't answer. I was frozen in place, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. But deep down, I knew there was no explanation, no rationalization that could make this go away. She moved closer, her cold breath chilling my skin, and I could finally see her face, pale, almost translucent, with dark, hollow eyes that seemed to bore into my soul. Her lips barely moved as she spoke again, this time with a hint of anger. "Leave before it's too late." I don't know what came over me, but something inside snapped. I jumped up, bolting for the door, and as I did, the lights flickered wildly, plunging the room into darkness. I fumbled with the lock, my hands trembling, and as I yanked the door open, I could hear her scream, a shrill, blood-curdling wail that echoed down the hallway, chasing me as I ran. I didn't stop until I was in my car, my hands shaking as I tried to start the engine. I looked back at the motel, and there she was, standing in the doorway of room 13, her figure outlined against the flickering light. Her eyes were still on me, filled with that same sorrow, that same warning. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I floored the gas and sped off into the night, not stopping until I was miles away. I never went back to that town, and I never told anyone about what happened. But sometimes, late at night when the world is quiet, I can still hear her voice, whispering in the darkness, asking that same question. Why are you here? And every time, I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't left, if I had stayed and found out the answer.